Hi, everybody. It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. I have been anticipating this interview for a while. I'm so glad that we're finally having a chance to do it. Today, we are welcoming one of our guests from the past. His name is Ashish Joshi, and I don't want to already start introducing him and his special niche of what he does, but we often think of him as the dream team or part of a dream team of people who can really help clients in our situations of the most extreme divorces, separations, custody battles, and difficult co-parenting situations. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is so specific, but I think really important for our community, and that's the connection between parental alienation and autism, specifically gatekeeping behaviors when it comes to neurodivergent children. So Ashish, I know that when I was getting my undergraduate degree in education, I had to take a class for special education, and I learned that of divorce cases that are with special needs kids, 90% of families end up not staying together. Their parents split. I don't know if it's because of a tremendous amount of pressure with taking care of a special needs child, but I know our community of clients is very super common, very high number of clients whose kids have special needs and or ADHD. Do you see the same thing with the people that you work with? It does seem to be a high number of special needs issues.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you on the show. To answer your question, there's been a significant increase in the number of cases in family courts involving some sort of special need issue. So you might have a parent who is on the spectrum, autism spectrum, or a child who is autistic, or severe ADHD, dyslexia, and other issues. And there's been a sea change in how we see the issue of neurodivergence in family courts. And some of the things that have come together to lead to this increase is the widening definition of autism, how it has changed over a period of time and continues to change as we sit here today. The increased awareness of the neurodivergent situation and how special needs has moved from what used to be stigma and shame to more awareness and openness and curiosity about this condition. And finally, earlier detection tools and the medical help that is available in these cases. My practice focuses on cases involving family violence, of which domestic violence and intimate partner violence are but one facet. But it also includes cases involving emotional abuse or coercive controlling behaviors and parental alienation, which is also seen as gatekeeping behaviors. So, in a case where there is a perfect storm, you might have a child who is autistic and one parent who is not so much involved or aware of the child's condition, or perhaps is in a little bit of denial as well, and the other parent who is super involved, highly attuned to the child's needs, over involved at times, perhaps even enmeshed in some situations. And then that parent starts engaging in certain kind of gatekeeping behaviors, which could lead down the road, if unchecked, into an alienation situation. I mean, generally speaking, children are always vulnerable to alienating behaviors. But when you have a child with special needs, this could be a significant issue in those cases. And they're so hard to manage from a family court's perspective because the family judge is trying to look for solutions. And these cases involve so many complex dynamics that it requires a tremendous amount of judicial oversight.
Yeah, so you mentioned what you do, and I think it's really niche. So can you tell us a little more about why you handle these specific cases? Like what made you so passionate about this area?
Well, it just happened to be that one case led to another.
Hmm.
And my earlier background was in criminal defense and family law. And I got into the area of alienation through the issues and topics related to child suggestibility and forensic interviewing of a child in cases involving child abuse allegations.
Mm-hmm.
And over a period of time, there is an increase in the amount of cases involving neurodivergence. And I began to get cases and inquiries about cases involving where a child happens to be autistic or a parent has a severe ADHD problem, or there are other issues regarding neurodivergence versus neurotypical issues.
Mm-hmm.
And as I learned more about this, I found that there is a significant lack of awareness in how to approach these cases. There is a significant issue also regarding implicit bias that professionals have about these cases, that sometimes judges have regarding these cases involving neurodivergence. Often one feels that if a parent happens to be autistic, or a parent happens to have Asperger's or ADHD, then by that definition, the parent might not be capable of being a fit parent. And there is some sort of a bias associated with that. And that's not the case, because at the end of the day, even though a parent might have a condition or a disability, you have to focus on how that disability or that condition affects parenting.
Mm-hmm.
You could have a parent who is autistic, but the parent is managing that condition with medication, with therapy, with cognitive behavioral therapy issues and other things. And that parent ultimately is a fit and capable and a loving parent. And by the same token, you might have a child who has these issues. And because certain behaviors are pretty normative for an autistic child, sometimes they are misinterpreted in some situations. For example, an autistic child could engage in a severely emotional dysregulated behavior. Now, the parent who happens to be the custodial parent in that situation might be seen as unfit parent, or a parent who doesn't know how to take care of the child, or a parent who might be abusive, because why would the child be reacting in such a fashion?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take a close look at that situation and see what's going on. Is it that the case that the parent is abusive or an unfit parent, or is the child reacting in that particular manner because the child is going through significant amount of transitions? The child's entire world is turned upside down by the loss of structure, by the
Mm-hmm.
loss of regularity and consistency, which an autistic child needs and comes to depend upon.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And as you were talking, I just kept thinking of so many cases that we have where our clients have ADHD. They're adults with ADHD, and it's been weaponized against them, or they have other mental health issues that the threat of, the kid doesn't ever do this with me. They only do it with you. And so you must be the problem parent. I think it's very reassuring to hear that just because you have a condition doesn't mean that you're going to be stripped of your parental rights. And yeah. So anyway, I think that I also am curious about this idea of gatekeeping, because I think at the same time we have clients who are parents of special needs kids who are very attuned to them and are making comments like, my ex doesn't know how to handle our child. I'm the child's special person. They only attach to me, and therefore it's just better that the kid is with me more of the time, and my ex has to be restricted in terms of their parenting time. And when I hear that, even though it's our client and we're their advocate, it makes me anxious, because I feel like it's something that could be weaponized against them, and they might not be actually thinking properly in terms of how they need to support that child's relationship with the other parent.
So that's pretty accurate. And when we look at these situations, we have to look at it from a totality of a standpoint. So, first of all, let's talk about gatekeeping. When we talk about gatekeeping in a family law context, we are essentially speaking of three different kinds of gatekeeping. One is facilitative gatekeeping, where there is a healthy dynamic between the two parents, and each of them engages in trying to facilitate the relationship between the child and the other parent. So, for example, if the child has soccer practice and it's mom's turn to take the kid to the practice, and mom's caught up in traffic or has work issues, she calls the other parent, the dad, and say, hey, can you help out? Can you engage in some facilitative gatekeeping here, or take the child to the practice and I will meet you on the field? Or things like that, where there's a give and take of information, there's an exchange of ideas, there's an exchange of responsibilities as well. And that's a healthy dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talk about protective gatekeeping. In that situation, there's a parent who is trying to protect the child from anticipated or imminent harm, where one parent is a fit parent, a healthy parent, the other parent has significant issues such as alcohol or substance abuse or abusive parenting, neglect, and there is a chance that the child may suffer harm if the child is left unsupervised with the other parent. So the protective parent is trying to engage in protective gatekeeping, making sure that the other parent is safe, making sure that the other parent has tools that he or she needs to engage in parenting. So there is some sort of interference, there is some sort of oversight, but it's meant for the well-being of the child and it's done in a protective manner. It's justified.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have what is seen as restrictive gatekeeping. And restrictive gatekeeping comes into play when there is one parent who believes that the other parent is dangerous or unsafe or just not a fit parent or abusive parent. But there is no reason to have those doubts or those beliefs. Those belief systems are unjustified, they are not warranted. So in that situation, you would see this parent as sending the law enforcement to do well check results, sending CPS workers to go and check on the other parent and the child to see if the kid's safe,
Mm-hmm.
texting or calling the child and consistently and continuously asking questions such as, do you feel safe with your mom? Are
Mm-hmm.
you safe with your dad? Are you
Or
okay?
yeah, I was about to say, call me if you don't feel okay.
Exactly. Call me if you don't feel okay. You know how to get to 911. You know how to call the guardian ad litem. So consistently, there is an effort to create this impression that the other parent is unloving, unsafe, unfit, all of that.
Yeah.
And that is called restrictive gatekeeping, which is also seen as an alienating behavior. So these are the different forms of gatekeeping. Now, when you put this gatekeeping's behaviors in the context with special needs child, you might have a situation where one parent believes himself or herself to be an expert.
Mm-hmm.
I alone know what our child needs. I alone have read the research in the field. I alone know what the child is capable of doing or not doing. So that parent puts himself or herself on a pedestal as a status of an expert and demotes the other parent to a level of being a completely incompetent parent. And you have to look at it carefully. Sometimes it's a situation where the parent who claims to be an expert or highly attuned
Mm-hmm.
may be justified a little bit in thinking of that because the other parent is in complete denial. We have these cases where even though there has been a diagnosis of the child with having special needs, one parent is very much interested in getting the child the tools that he or she needs to succeed in the society, to succeed in the school, to succeed in the extracurricular activities, and things like that. Whereas the other parent continues to blame the different parent for this situation and is in complete denial,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that no, this is all in your head. The child doesn't need that. My son is not autistic. He or she doesn't have dyslexia, etc. So there's constant tug of war. And then you see an attempt to shop for doctors,
Oh yeah.
where one parent keeps on shopping for different doctors and different therapists or different clinicians until he or she gets the diagnosis that they are looking for. So there are all different kinds of contexts involved in these cases. But you also see one parent involving child in these situations. So, for example, you might see, let's say it's the mom in this situation who is being very overprotective, engaged in some sort of restrictive gatekeeping behavior as well. And you see comments made by the mom to the child, such as, well, you better take care of your medication yourself because you know how dad is. And entrusting adult decisions to the child, for example, giving the medication or the dose to the child to take care of rather than trusting the other parent to do it.
Mhm. Let me ask
So,
you about that because that comes up a lot. A lot of what you said comes up good and bad amongst our
mhm.
clients. With the medication, we have clients whose exes deny that something exists and they don't give them the medication and it affects the child. What do you do when you have an ex who does not comply with the child's medical treatment for something involving ADHD or neurodivergence?
Well, you first of all look at whether the medication has been prescribed by
Let's
a
say it has.
pediatrician.
It has.
Right. So,
Yeah.
assuming that it's a prescribed medication and assuming that it's not an isolated incident, but rather a pattern of behavior where the other parent is refusing to accept that diagnosis, you might have a case of medical neglect.
Mhm.
And depending on the severity of it, it could rise to the level of being child abuse. So you want to make sure that the child doesn't suffer from that distorted thinking pattern that the parent has. You might need to severely curtail that parent's time. You might need the parent to have supervised visitation. But at the end of the day, the goal here is to make sure that the child is safe
Mhm.
and the child gets the medication, the therapy, the attention that the child needs and deserves.
Yeah. Okay. So now on the other end, where we have clients who do have children with special needs, who have been the more involved, who are the more expert parent, and saying, I am worried because of my own relationship with my ex. I know they're not going to do the right thing, and oh, I'm the one that the child can rely on. So those are the situations where what Chris and I do, I think this is going to our client is not going to do well for their child as a parent. It's going to affect the child in a harmful way, but also legally, this can be used against them. What advice would you have for a parent who is thinking, I'm the expert, I'm the one who knows the child best, I'm the special person? What would you say to a parent who may inadvertently be doing these things without thinking that they're doing anything wrong? They're labeling themselves as a protective parent.
I would suggest that that person get a good parenting coach. A good parenting coach who is really knowledgeable in the area of high conflict dynamics, especially in the area of children or a parent having special needs. It is critical to have someone from the outside who you can use as a sounding board, someone who you can someone you can trust to give you the right advice, not just what you want to hear. The problem in these situations is that the parent who labels himself or herself as a protective parent then goes on and joins these groups on the internet or somewhere outside and gives only selected information to those folks.
Mhm.
And it's an echo chamber. You
Yes.
keep on hearing what you want to hear, you keep on having those belief systems validated and entrenched, even though they may not be warranted to begin with. So, having a good parenting coach is essential because it helps you engage in some reality testing. It helps you understand whether you are coming across from a point where you are being a protective parent or you are being overprotective or restrictive.
Mhm.
Because it may not play out well in the court if you're continuously trying to interfere with the other parent's time. And there may be concerns down the road of your having boundary violations with the child or getting really enmeshed with the child.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of this, you started talking about it, but let's say I'm a parent of a special needs child and my ex is doing that. What kinds of things should I look for to start documenting in terms of before I go to a lawyer and say, this is a problem that my ex is keeping the child away from me or leaving me out of the loop and not giving me an opportunity to participate in the child's treatment? Like, what are those red flags or warning signs that matter? Because, everyone hears document everything. It's too much.
Well, you try to document all instances of interference with your custodial and parenting rights. So if the other parent is cutting you off from the child's medical and therapeutic appointments, if the other parent is cutting you off from being engaged parent with the school, if the other parent is basically letting you know what he or she thinks you need to know, if there are communications between you and the other parent where the other parent is being very condescending,
Mm,
very dismissive, very just inappropriate with all of your input, your opinions as a co-parent, if the other parent has put himself or herself on a pedestal of being a super parent and has demoted you down to being a sub parent, all of those instances and evidence come together to present to the court about how your parenting rights are not just being severely curtailed and violated, but also how it's affecting the child. In some situations, you see one parent elevating himself or herself to the level of being super parent and then trying to mediate the dispute between the child and the other parent as if the child and the other parent are on the same level.
mhm,
So, for example, if mom would complain that the child is being very disrespectful and defiant and very oppositional because of some inappropriate coaching by the other parent or over empowerment, the other parent then takes a stance of, well, what did you do to deserve that? Let's talk to the child.
mhm.
You must have done something to deserve this kind of defiance from the child. So then that parent tries to mediate the dispute and puts the parent and the child on the same level. And that leads to some really, problematic corruption in the family hierarchy here, where the children or the child continues to get over empowered
Mhm.
and the other parent continues to get demoted down to a level where he or she has no parental authority.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely see that a lot, unfortunately. So let's talk about therapeutic intervention because we see Kate, you're obviously a domestic violence attorney who specializes in alienation. When let's say someone has gone to court because the child has been pulled away physically or emotionally, and they're going down the road of not really wanting contact with that person. And let's say somebody does go to court, they get a court order for some type of therapeutic intervention, whether it's reunification therapy or just to start meeting with a third party to begin to repair whatever the rupture has been in the relationship. Problem we see all the time, and not just with special needs kids, is that alienating parent delays therapeutic intervention, and all of this time keeps passing, and they're getting our client, this is happening to many of them, where they're getting so frustrated because they have a court order that says therapeutic intervention. They want to start working on the relationship and repairing the damage, but nobody is enforcing it, and their ex may have legal decision making, final say, tie breaking authority, and they just delay choosing a therapist. Like, do you have any ideas for enforcing a court order that is just like languishing?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and I see this all the time. So, first of all, when we talk about therapy, it's important to realize that in a case involving alienation dynamics, where there is evidence, not just allegations, but there is evidence of one parent's alienating behaviors and how it's affecting the child or the children, it's important to not go for individual therapy because that is only going to reinforce some really distorted thinking and entrenching alienation further.
You mean individual, like the child goes alone,
Yeah,
or you and the child go together?
the child having an individual therapist.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, the child is rejecting the mom
Hmm.
because of dad's influence and dad's alienating behaviors and dad's restrictive gatekeeping. If the child goes to an individual therapist who may decide to bring in mom for some conjoint sessions down the road or not, what the risk of in that situation is that the individual therapist is going to validate the child's belief system and emotions against the mom. So the child's going to say, I don't want to see my mom because she's abusive.
Hmm.
And the therapist is going to try to get some rapport going with the child and validate the child's emotions. And the common refrain in these situations is that, we can't go to reunification or we can't go for conjoint sessions because the child is not ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the child never gets to a point of becoming ready. The same complaints get repeated ad nauseum again and again. So it's important to go for some sort of therapeutic intervention that is based on the family systems.
Okay, good. We say this all the time. So I'm so glad you agree.
Right, because in a family systems approach, the counselor or the clinician is working with the entire family and looking at the family dynamics. If there is some sort of a corruption in the family hierarchy, that needs to be corrected. If there is any polarization in how the child views versus mom versus dad, that needs to be rectified as well. If there are concerns about the rejected parent, adding to the contribution or contributing to the dynamic by reacting poorly to alienation or inappropriately lashing out at the child in anger or frustration, that needs to be corrected as well. So this clinician or counselor is dealing with the entire family. Now, to assist with that family systems approach, mom and dad or even the child might have individual therapists as well. So they have a place to process their thoughts, to talk about their feelings, not just in the family setting.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's the case, it's important that the family counselor has access to those individual therapists and is able to talk to them
So a
to prevent
team approach.
team approach, because
I've heard it
you don't
case
want
management.
silos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't want silos. You don't want dad's team versus mom's team versus child's team. You
Mm-hmm.
want a family team. So the family counselor is at the head of the pyramid here, and he or she makes sure that everyone's pushing in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some cases might have a speedy resolution, some might be dragging their feet, but at least the push should be in the right direction, and that's important. Now, how to get the court to enforce the orders? You have to go back to court and ask for appropriate relief. So, for example, if mom engages quickly and pays the retainer for the family systems counselor to get on board, makes the regular appointments, goes to the sessions, whereas dad drags his feet and doesn't do that, keeps on coming up with an excuse,
Mm-hmm.
not bring the child. You need to be able to go back to the court and get the court to enforce the orders. There has to be some consequence for actions or omissions. Maybe an award of attorney fees, maybe a sanction, maybe a fine. But cases where these things get resolved in a very constructive manner are cases where the judges keep the judicial oversight, where they are willing and ready and able to have review hearings. And it could be a short hearing, it could be done via Zoom or telephone as well. Doesn't have to be in person all the time. But what's important is that the judge keeps the judicial oversight over the case and the case dynamics. So people know that they're going to be held accountable. You are going to see the judge in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, and the judge is going to ask for an update. So the lawyers are incentivized as well to make sure their clients comply with the court orders.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a situation where the judge enters an order and it's left to the parties and the lawyers to comply with it. And if someone doesn't, then the other party has the burden to file a motion, get the case noticed up, get it before the judge, which could take months.
Yeah. And
So
in the
one
process, it can embolden someone because there's
exactly,
no consequences. No
exactly.
swift, severe
Yeah,
consequences.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's better to have those review hearings built in at the very front end so that everyone knows that the court's going to ask for an update and we want to make sure everyone's complying with it.
Yeah. So we often use the term case management and we tell our clients you should ask for case management. Is there a specific way to ask for that kind of thing? Or do they have to specifically say, can we set up review hearings?
It's a jurisdiction specific issue. Some jurisdictions have professionals such as parenting coordinators,
Mm-hmm.
or some jurisdictions have referees and magistrates who work with the judges, but are a little on a level less than a trial judge, who won't have evidentiary hearings but will keep an active case management role
Mm-hmm.
or even help out in discovery issues. But whatever your jurisdiction is, the idea is to get some judicial oversight,
Mhm.
whether it's a review hearing, having a referee on the case, having a magistrate, a parenting coordinator, whatever it is.
Yeah, we just say more eyes on your case.
Right, someone who is going to keep an eye on the case and hold a hearing where if things are not going well, your lawyer or you have an opportunity to tell the court what's wrong and why is it not going the way it should, so that we can catch the non-compliance part of it early on and give the case the intervention it needs.
Yeah.
The
All right.
problem becomes the cases get really toxic when
Mhm.
the non-compliance is allowed to fester without any consequence.
Yeah. And we unfortunately see that fairly frequently, which is such a tragedy. So also started thinking about this came up recently, and this comes up with a lot of our clients as well, with special needs and non-special needs kids, where a child is a teenager. They're aging out of the legal system. And our client is worried because there hasn't been intervention and they really want therapy. To repair the relationship, but the kid is too old or getting close to being too old and the child's voice matters. How do you suggest approaching a situation like that where the court might just throw up its hand and say, well, the kid's 17, or in Georgia, the kid's almost 14. So there's really nothing we can do. I feel like there's still ways to be persuasive in terms of thinking about the long-term consequences for a child who's one of their primary attachment figures is being cut off, and the impact it will have on the rest of their lives if we just say, well, there's nothing we can do about
Well, it all boils down to the judicial wisdom. You know, I've had judges who are really experienced in this area send a clear message that they expect the parents and the child to comply with the court orders. That if there's going to be non-compliance, it's going to have a consequence. If you as a parent are telling a court that you can't make your child comply with the court-ordered counseling or court-ordered visitation because the child won't do it, well, then you are in a way signaling to the court that you are an incompetent parent.
it. Hmm.
I mean, how do you make your child go to school? How do you make the child go to a medical appointment? How do you make the child go to a dentist appointment? Things like that.
Hmm.
And of course, you have to also have some tact. It's a combination of incentives and consequences.
Hmm.
So I had a case where a child was 16 and didn't want to go to counseling, which was court ordered, but the child was really interested in getting the driving permit. And the court ordered that, well, if you want your driving permit, you need to have both parents sign off. And I'm not going to empower one parent to just sign off and have the other parent cut out. So you want your driving permit? Well, you have to work with your mom and go to counseling, and mom and you can work on this issue during your counseling appointments, and mom can help you to learn driving as well, and let's go with that. And the child had that incentive. So
I like
it's basically you have to work out certain situation. I mean, yes, brute force is not going to work, but at the same time throwing up your hands and say a 16-year-old is going to be 16-year-old and not going to comply with the court orders, it doesn't send the right message either.
Yeah, yeah. So, but in situations where, and we talked about this briefly before we got on camera, where a child is a teenager and the other parent is saying, I can't make the kid show up for some kind of therapy with the targeted parent. What do you think about asking for relief in where the alienating parent would then be responsible? So, oh, you can't get the kid to show up, well then you show up in the child's place, and then the therapist can work with you directly. And I'm thinking, if family systems therapy wasn't ordered initially.
I think that's an important issue, and you have to be creative and thinking about different options. Now, you have to be careful. If you have a parent who is very much enmeshed with the child and has been alienating for a long time, you don't want the parent's presence to substitute for the child's presence,
Hmm.
because the alienating parent would happily go along and say, well, let me tell you why the kid doesn't want to see you,
Hmm.
and use every session to just bash the other parent. So it could be a combination of the parent has to attend the session, or the parent bears the cost of that canceled session,
Mm-hmm.
or there's a fine at issue, or the parent brings the child to that session and the other parent is not a part of it yet, but the counselor gets to talk to the child and the parent together and see whether the other favored parent is truly encouraging and facilitating the child to attend counseling sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if mom's the favored parent and mom says, well, a kid won't go to a session with dad, fine, mom, bring the kid to a session. We won't have dad there, but let's just have talk to you and the kid together.
Mm-hmm.
And then the counselor would turn to the mom and say, why don't you tell the kid about the importance of the dad in her life? Why do you think that this is much needed for her benefit? What's the positive thing that you see coming out of this?
Mm-hmm.
So mom then has to engage in that. And if mom is recalcitrant, if she is not doing the right thing, at least we now have clinical data
Mm.
that the counselor can inform the court about. So you have to do something. What is not helpful is just having those counseling sessions go missing on again and again, and nothing is done.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. And then I know we're pretty much at time, but just because you deal with this all the time and it is so heartbreaking, these a friend of ours named Charlie McCready said there's something called pre-alienation before a parent split, when things start to happen that lead you to believe, even though you're probably not conscious of it, that this is going to be one of those cases where a parent creates a loyalty conflict and it's already the child's already pulling away before the parents even move out of the same residence. Are there any tips or ideas that you can give to people to prevent this, or if they're in the middle of it, what can I do to mitigate?
Early intervention.
Okay.
Early intervention in terms of psychoeducational tools. Again, family systems approach is a great one for that. You need the mom and dad, and sometimes even the children, depending on the age, to understand what behaviors are healthy,
Mm-hmm.
what is inappropriate. If one parent has concerns about the other parent's parenting, you need to approach that in a way that the child is not influenced.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big fan of that documentary or the docu-movie, Welcome Home Pluto by Richard Warshak. And in that documentary, Dr. Warshak explains how it's important to compartmentalize certain emotions and to not have the child exposed to those emotions. How a parent might be inadvertently engaging in certain behaviors, which, if not checked over a period of time, could lead to alienation, and why it's important to modify those behaviors. So, in an early stage, it would be really helpful to not play the blame game,
Mm-hmm.
but rather approach a situation as we are trying to give you the tools for you to manage the conflict as co-parents. Each of you have a complaint about the other parent, parenting skill, capacity, or how the child's reacting to this conflict. Let's take a little bit of a deep dive into the family dynamics here and see what's going on. See if people come together trying to find a solution, and with a skilled clinician, that could be really helpful.
Mm. Yeah, totally agree. Well, Ashish, thank you so much once again for taking the time to talk about this and other things, and also for helping our clients and our community with the work that you do. We really, really appreciate it. And obviously, it's so needed because this is such an epidemic.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, let's stay in touch and talk soon.
You got it.